Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work.
Hello, smart people. How are you today? Have you seen the Bond movie? I saw it a couple of days ago and I really liked it. People say it's long and it's longer than normal Bond movies, but I really didn't feel like it was long because there's a lot of action. Anyway, it is my recommendation of the week. But moving on to technology, did you see the news about Tesla yesterday? So Tesla reached a valuation of $1 trillion. I want $1 trillion. No other car maker has actually reached these heights of valuation. In fact, the only companies that have reached a $1 trillion valuation are tech giants. So that's Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet, which is the company that owns Google. And you know, when the news came out, I noticed that there was a lot of commentary about whether Tesla is a car maker and thus should be compared to like VW, or whether it's a tech company like Apple. And I think that this is actually the wrong distinction to make, because in some way, every company, or almost every company, is now becoming a tech company, or basically it dies. So listen to this. Oil companies like Shell combine data science expertise, so they're high data scientists, and seismic data to work out where to drill for oil. L'Oreal uses visual search algorithms to predict which shade of lipstick to make. Starbucks has made an app to drive customer loyalty and drive down the cost of customer service. So for many of the people listening, I'm assuming you are using the Starbucks app or L'Oreal lipstick, or maybe you've been to a Shell gas station recently. And literally in these examples, I've shown you an oil company, a beauty company, and a coffee shop. Yet, smart use of technology is helping these businesses perform. And my point is that if you want to have any kind of success in today's economy, doesn't matter if you're working in oil, in beauty, or in a coffee shop, you've got to learn to speak tech. And this doesn't actually mean building an algorithm with your bare hands, but you've got to know what an algorithm is and how it gets built. Also, it doesn't mean that you need to design the app yourself, but you do need to know what design thinking is and how you can apply it to your work. Tomorrow, I am teaching a free class on these topics. So if you are an ambitious person who wants to have a great career, which I'm assuming you do because you're listening to this podcast, we do not attract lazy people here, then you would better sign up to the class. The link to the class is in the show notes, or just go to www.techfornontechies.co/speaktech-class. That's www.techfornontechies.co/speaktech-class, or just go to the show notes. Today, my dear smart people, we are going to learn about a key aspect of innovation. And that is, how do you define the problem that you're solving? So you can make sure that you're building a solution that people actually want. You are going to hear from somebody I find incredibly impressive. This is Thomas Wedell-Wedellsborg. He is a best-selling business author whose fans include me and Eric Schmidt. And that's the CEO of Google, so not bad, right? So Thomas's research has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, The Economist, The Sunday Times, The Telegraph, BBC, Bloomberg, The Financial Times, and more. And he is also part of Thinkers 50, which is like the Oscars of management thinking. So I think you're going to get a lot out of the session. So let's get our learn on and enjoy. Hello, Thomas, and welcome to Tech for Non-techies. I am completely impartial here. No, I am completely partial here. That's what I meant to say. I'm not objective remotely, because I've read your latest book called What's Your Problem? And I've become a fan. And that's why I reached out on Twitter and basically said, please, Thomas, I want more because I have many problems. And I'm hoping that in this session, you will solve at least 75% of them.
That seems like a good aim. If we can't reach a full 100, I'll of course accept all blame.
Indeed. So before we start talking about my many problems and your many solutions to them, I would love to find out about you and your background, because as far as I understand, you began your career in the army, but now you are an author, and you've got Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, recommending your book. So how does one go from the army to however you would describe yourself now?
Well, the transition from the army to a pacifistic author is maybe not so great as it sounds like once you realize that we're talking about the Danish army. We're a fairly small country. To be honest, mostly what we did in my army career was to run around and practice saying "we surrender" in different languages. So we were not exactly the most fearsome warriors you'd run into. But I think the short story is I was really I did an MBA at one point instead of doing a PhD. And during that, I started working together with an old professor of mine who was deeply immersed in kind of innovation, both the theory part and working with companies and kind of putting it into action. And it was really through our collaboration that just grew stronger and stronger that we jointly realized there are some missing pieces around innovation, and that led to our the first book, which we co-authored around that. So it was really literally just a collaboration with an old professor, not during my MBA, but afterwards we randomly kind of got in touch, and he pulled me in for a project, and it was a lot of fun. And I found out I was better at doing it than other things I've tried. So that's what I've been doing the last 15 years, basically.
So tell me about the first book. What is it about?
It came from the recognition that a lot of the stuff we were teaching companies around innovation was kind of geared towards, like, if you're either in Silicon Valley in a garage or if you're like in innovation departments or whatnot. But most people aren't in that situation. They are just running the business. They have a normal job in the best sense of the word. And we realized from working with companies that if you try to import all the the Hawaii shirt type creativity and all of those things, it fails. And even stuff like, fail fast. That's great if you're running a dating app, but it is a little bit less great if you're in a bank or if you're in an airline or if you're in a pharmaceutical company. Then failure has very real consequences. And so it was really from that mismatch that we put together a guide. It's called Innovation as Usual. A guide for regular people working in regular organizations on how to actually drive innovation in practice as part of a day job. So it's kind of very pragmatic, like, here are the things you actually need to do versus, the classical idea of, let's go off to Brainstorm Island for a 2-day seminar with a creative person, and then we'll brainstorm. Like, that doesn't have too good a track record in creating real changes. So that was really the anchor and what led me into the dark realms of authorship, if you will.
It's interesting what you said, because I remember when I was running my first company, which is a tech business, we had this partnership with a very large corporate, but I can't tell you who they are because unfortunately I signed a legal agreement, but I'd love to, because they basically just did a bunch of really stupid stuff that was very well-meaning. So I think they read a bunch of books about lean startups, and so then they basically got a bunch of startups in for corporate partnerships, mainly, so I thought, was basically to torture us. So we could be in posted hell where we would just be in all these brainstorming sessions. And it was really great fun for all of the employees because they were getting paid no matter what. And then they just had these startuppers to play with like dolls. And I was thinking, we need to work. We need to do things. We need to have results. And there was such a misalignment. And also, I think because it was my first business, I completely didn't communicate it properly. So I basically just sat there eating all the free biscuits and hating everybody. Hopefully I matured a bit.
Exactly. The ideal picture of employee engagement, clearly. Eat the biscuits and hate everybody. I think there's another reason behind that too, because I'd argue overall, it's kind of a good thing when companies start to look at lean startup practices. They may start experimenting in the field and so on. What I've noticed, though, is that often the actual, call them products, that companies buy around it, they are optimized to be sold and to be a good experience versus to create change. And because if you are let's say a design agency that's offering some kind of lean startup type experience, you kind of want to dial up the creativity and the flamboyance and all of those things that make it non-corporate, because that sells better. It's a better sales pitch to say, hey, we got these crazy talented people, and it's a more fun experience in some way, at least for some people, the non-biscuit eaters, I guess. In terms of like you're getting this week-long vacation from your normal work. Problem is, all of those things kind of make it harder to integrate it into the real world. Like a lot of the practical things we ended up recommending in the book was basically stuff like, don't try to make it too creative in the sense of like branding it creatively. Try to actually, if you're in a conservative company, your thing should look conservative because that fits into the culture. The people I saw succeed with doing new things in a big company, they kind of looked like their company. They were regular corporate citizens, and they used the trust that people had in them to get things done outside of the formal channels and so on, much more than necessarily relying on one of those, like the high profile hackathon week, those things. They're not bad. I wouldn't say that. I do think they can make a change if they're put to proper use. But if you think that's the key to innovation, then you're probably going to have an experience like the one you sounded like you went through.
So tell me, is innovation always linked to technology, or is it always linked to digital transformation? And if not, can you give us some examples?
Yeah, this is one of the key ideas we try to share, that many innovations that succeed have nothing to do with new technology. And I think, my favorite example is the story of when we put wheels on suitcases, which happened in the year 1972. Or in other words, we basically, we basically first invented the wheel, then we put a man on the moon, and then we put wheels on suitcases. Like that sounds funny, but that's actually pretty systematic of many innovations, that we focus overly much on technology. And sure, there are innovations that come out of technology. Of course there are. But we often, because of that focus, miss just the ability to see people's problems and ask, hey, can we actually solve this problem with old technology, with stuff we already master that's not risky, that, if you're doing a blockchain thing right now, there's some risk attached to that because that's still a technology we're sorting out. But if you're going in and solving a problem with putting wheels on something, that's a technology we mastered pretty well by now. And the risks of that type of innovation is just much smaller, older, if you will.
So in your view, why do you think we as humans get more excited about putting people on the moon than putting wheels on suitcases?
It makes for better headlines. Like if you are oriented towards, being recognized as one of the rock stars of your industry or whatever, well, you want a rock star scale innovation. You want to, create the next, maybe Facebook. I don't know if that's a good example anymore, but these kind of very heroic stories about disruption and all of this. Problem with that is when you look at the statistics behind, like, success-wise, generally, this depends on how you define failure, but one researcher called Daniel Yon went in and found that something like 97% of all really attempts at true big disruption, they fail. Whereas the second you move into, call it more ordinary types of innovation in a good sense, then your failure rate is just much more compatible with having a normal job. Because sure, if you work in an R&D department, you can tolerate a 97% failure rate. That's just that's fine. Or at least that's manageable. But if you work in a regular company, try to do new things, and 97% of the time you fail, then you're probably going to have a problem fairly soon in terms of holding on to your job. So there is just this insight that our focus and fascination with disruption can actually lead us astray from just going in and looking at basic problems people have and figuring out, hey, is there a better way to solve this? For 5 minutes as he's kind of pulling himself together out there. And then there's the 3 seconds of action that are really, that's what you wanted. And that's when you press the button. What was important here is, first and foremost, there was no technology really involved here. They didn't have to invent anything. They basically had all the existing ingredients. That it was just a recognition that editing is a problem. And that is something we can go in and solve. And secondly, and this is the kicker, their camcorder division had basically been in the red for years. This is a very thin margins in that market. It's hard to make money on it. That single invention made them profitable again. Literally, it allowed them to charge something like, I think it was 20 or 30 pounds more. This is in the UK market for the same camera as the competitor. Only that was the different feature. So really big game changer just by recognizing a problem that the rest of the industry had overlooked.
There's quite a lot of jargon in the tech and innovation space. And I'm just wondering, what you're describing, is that design thinking? Is it the same thing?
It's related to it. I think what I'm really talking about, and this is the core idea in my new book, What's Your Problem, is the need to get good at problem finding and problem framing versus solution finding or developing solutions and so on. And that's an old idea. It's been around longer than the design thinking movement. I would say the design thinking movement is probably the area in which it has been taken furthest in terms of democratizing how to do it. The challenge I still see with design thinking is it's still centered around designers. And that may be a basic point, but like most of the methods you see in that kind of assumes that you have a designer in the room or that you can run a more formal hackathon process and so on. What I wanted to do was to truly democratize people's ability to frame problems correctly. And so that's why I put out the book. It was literally just like, what's the simplest possible framework or tool I can teach people that allows them to get better at this. You don't have to master it. Like it's enough just to start getting better at it, because then you'll catch yourself more times when you're about to barrel down some kind of garden path and like build the thing you're falling in love with, instead of truly understanding, wait, what's actually the problem that the customer is trying to solve, or what's our internal problem? Because this is not only relevant for startup problems, it's equally relevant for collaboration problems, for leadership problems, for problems in the home front, for social problems, whatever you like. We have enough problems to go around, as I'm sure your listeners are fully aware of.
In the words of Jay-Z, I've got 99 problems and a bitch ain't one, which actually, in my case, is true. I don't know about everybody else here. It's interesting because when I work with non-technical founders or companies that want to essentially build tech products, but usually they are led by non-technical people, there is this tendency to think, oh, we've got budget, let's make a thing. Yeah. And then I feel like I am standing there as this one woman holding back wild horses that want to hire teams of developers. And the thing is, I understand this because I actually was like this myself before I actually launched a tech venture and then made all of the mistakes that now I'm teaching people not to make. Right. And do you find that this let's build a solution without identifying the problem, is that more prevalent in the tech world where people really like building things, or is this a general problem that everybody experiences?
It's a general problem that is slightly stronger in the tech world, because of course, if you code all day, you are fascinated with what you can build, and therefore you focus more on it. But it's really generic. Like it is almost anywhere you go in, people quickly fall in love with a solution, and then they try to move forward with it. I actually think, with looking at your audience, like people who are non-techies, as you put it, they actually have a really key role to play here, because when you're in a team of techies, the techies tend to focus on the technology, and you can hardly really go up against them on the technical details. Again, you're not a techie, But what you can do is to make sure that there's enough focus on this issue of, wait, do we actually understand the problem we're solving here? Instead of plonking down 500,000 and building something next half year that then turns out to just completely miss the mark in terms of whether it's actually solving a problem. I saw a really fun story of this this is again in Samsung. What had happened was they had just put out one of their new Galaxy phones. Mm-hmm. And one of their competitors, of course, is that's the iPhone. And when you have had an iPhone and then you buy a Galaxy, well, then you need to transfer your data from it. When you, not surprisingly, Apple being Apple, when you buy an Apple, that process is really painless. Apple just grabs whatever data you have and it works. Now, what had happened in Samsung was they had actually built an app that did this. So when people switch from an iPhone to Samsung, there's an app that sucked all of your photos, your data, like contacts and all of that. This team, though, they questioned whether that was working because they had a sense, okay, we have an app for that. But let's just go take a look at whether it actually works for people. And they set up an experiment where they paid a bunch of people £300 if they were willing to switch to a Samsung Galaxy and use that for, I think it was a month or something like that. And what they realized was a lot of people said no to that because they said yes initially, but then they dropped out once they tried to use that app, literally because they were afraid they're going to lose all their photos, their contacts, and so on. And from that basic, a fairly small experiment in the UK market, they realized, okay, our wonderful technology solution has not solved the problem, even though the mothership in Korea thinks it's solved. So they go in, they build an alternative that actually works, they launch it, and that's like a million downloads in the first week or whatever. They basically solve a big problem for the corporation by making sure, by double checking that the problem we want to solve is actually solved instead of just looking at, hey, we have this gleaming new app that'll do it for us, so we're good. No, you weren't good because your users didn't trust it. And here's a better solution. So super simple example of how this focus on both understanding the problem before you build, but also actually understanding the problem after you build something and making sure whether you need to tweak it or move it further. And that's, I think, a really important role that non-techies can play very powerfully because we're a little bit less blinded by our fascination and our closeness to the technology.
What Thomas is talking about here is a key concept in product development, and that's product analysis. Not all tech products are going to be useful, as we have heard in the session. The way to figure out whether a product is valuable or just eats up money and time is by analyzing user behavior. And that's something that we are going to cover in tomorrow's free session on How to Speak Tech, Masterclass for Leaders. Join the class and get smarter. The link is in the show notes, or just go to www.techfornontechies.co/speaktech-class. And my darling smart people, if you are loving what you're learning, because who wouldn't, then join me as a member at Tech for Non-techies. You're going to get monthly coaching sessions with me to help you plot your path and stay on track. You'll also have access to masterclasses with global experts like Thomas, so you can ask them your questions and expand your network to some pretty awesome people. You literally cannot get access like this anywhere else. Our smart members also get access to a content library and learning notes on key aspects of technology like AI, product management, and the app economy, all aimed at non-techies. Tech for Non-techies members are very ambitious, smart people. They include alumni of Harvard, Oxford, and of course the University of Chicago, people who are buying companies, building businesses, and leading innovation. So it's a pretty good group. You can join us at techfornontechies.co/membership, and the link to that is in the show notes. And that's it for now, my dears. Have a fabulous day, and I will be back in your lovely ears next week. Ciao.